And good evening to our fellow listeners. This is Sunday, June 18th at 8:20 p.m. This is Federico Lines of States Rights Radio.
And Seth Hancock of Seth Hancock Reports. And tonight's episode, if you have nothing to hide, then you don't mind. That's been the excuse for government to snoop into our private lives. Tonight we're going to be talking pretty much about our right to privacy. It's kind of a interesting topic because the right to privacy is not explicitly stated in the Constitution. But a lot of the amendments, like the Fourth Amendment, would imply that we do have privacy rights. And this is an important topic because, it really deals with, our interactions with local police. And, I wrote a series of articles on this arrest in Pennsylvania of this Christian who was arrested for basically trying to quote the Bible at across the street from a pride event. That obviously there were First Amendment violations, in my opinion, there. Not only my opinion, but the DA, district's attorney who dropped the charges, basically vindicated the man. But there's also a lot of people don't realize, because he had a backpack on, was searched, that's a Fourth Amendment violation as well. And because that arrest was unlawful, had they found, let's say they found, illegal drugs in the guy's bag, which I doubt he would have had, but let's just say they did. Well, that wouldn't be admissible in court because the arrest was unlawful to begin with.
I got a question, Seth, on that one. I did read your article on that. Was this a county cop, a city cop? What was the officials from what department it was?
He was a city cop. It was a sergeant with the Reading Police Department. Okay, because before we went on the air, I briefly mentioned to you that the Supreme Court ruled that any unlawful evidence collected when violating the Fourth Amendment, it did not only apply to federal government but also the state government. So, we've seen a lot of violations done on the local level, city and county. We've seen it multiple times with, of course, in 2020 with George Floyd, with Michael Brown in Missouri, Freddie Gray in Maryland, and Breonna Taylor in Kentucky. So, this is something that, it should apply to all police enforcement agencies, local, city, county, state, and federal. And, many people are not aware of their rights and not aware of what a cop is supposed to do. A cop cannot even ask you questions because we have the right to innocence until proven guilty. They searched this young man and they didn't find anything, but they're not supposed to search this young man, and you cannot give up your privacy to be searched until he has a warrant, if they have probable cause or they have something to arrest him. So I'm glad they dropped the charges because, American citizens need to know their rights, both white Americans and black Americans and Mexican and Hispanic Americans and all type of Americans. We're all Americans here, and we all have the same rights. So I'm glad that this young man was let go. But, I just wish that, many people really would know their rights and what their rights are. So, but I'll let you continue with the story, and then we can comment on more on that. Effectively in this case, like I said, it really starts with the First Amendment violation, in that, the man was on public property, And the police and the cop in particular came up to this gentleman. His name was Damon Atkins. He was the man who was arrested, and effectively he just shows up. He has a sign that shows that he's a Christian, and the cop immediately goes up to interact with him and to tell him not to disrupt. And I mean, right from the get-go, the cop's asserting himself as some type of authority that he is not. He had no reason to go up and talk to this man, but he did anyways. And the cop, basically is giving orders that he doesn't have a right to give to begin with. They're on public property. You have the First Amendment. But again, tonight's episode talking about privacy and the Fourth Amendment, we kind of forget about that a little bit because the First Amendment's just more prominent to us. But we need to understand our rights to not be searched when cops ask. It happens a lot on traffic stops where cops will ask for permission, and they have to get permission to search your vehicle. I've seen a lot of videos. There's YouTube channels like Lackluster and Audit the Audit, where they go through police interactions. And you'll see a lot of these traffic stops where a cop just feels like will claim that they smell marijuana or something like that, which is very subjective. And the American citizens need to know their rights and to not give up their rights. If a cop ever asks you, I don't care if you're innocent. You don't give up your rights. You make them get a warrant if they really want to search you. And I guess one of the problems, you brought up a Supreme Court decision. The problem is there's so many, the Supreme Court has some, I guess, schizophrenic opinions, because there's also Terry v. Ohio from 1968, in which they basically said police officers can stop a suspect on the street and frisk them if the police officer has a, quote, reasonable suspicion that the person is committing or is about to commit a crime, and has a reasonable belief that the person may be armed and presently dangerous. This is a dangerous Supreme Court decision that basically says, well, for officer safety, if a cop stops you, he can frisk you, and that decision needs to be overturned. It's set a dangerous precedent to allow the police to abuse citizens.
Yeah, no, you're right, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I know many local officials, both political and authority figures, have used that this ruling to establish their political agenda on police force, and their support for police unions. Now, some politicians who come from right-to-work states, like my esteemed governor, he went to a police union fundraiser, and there he talked like he was a cop, and all in support for law enforcement and also for the unions. You're paying tributes to a police union, to part of the AFL-CIO, and it's the hypocritical mind of this. Rudy Giuliani, during his '94 mayoral race, he used that stop and frisk for his campaign to clean up New York. I'm not saying New York needed to be cleaned up. Yeah, New York suffered a lot of muggings, a lot of robberies. It was a very dangerous city back then, and Maybe some policies were good and some policies were not, but he went to the extreme of, law enforcement shooting a young innocent African student on a visa. I think it was 41 times or 61. I forgot how many times it was, but it was an abusive role of power. But, Justice White said in that opinion that there's nothing in the Constitution which prevents a policeman from addressing questions to anyone on the streets. Yes, there is. The Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment says that they don't have a right to unreasonable search and seizures or questions. They really don't. And, it's sad that some Supreme Court justices back then and now, Justice Clarence Thomas, which I vaguely agree with him, has always sided with law enforcement and not with the Fourth Amendment. And this is something where, then again with Donald Trump and the Trumpers, where, they side with law enforcement and not with the victims here. I mean, they claim, law enforcement claim that George Floyd was an opiate addict, or I forgot what it was, or a counterfeiter. Okay, fine, then get a warrant and, and search his premises if he does have some counterfeit bills. But, you can't just search him just like that. And you cannot, of course, put his knee on his throat and all that, because that's excessive force. That goes against his constitutional rights. He has rights. You have rights. I have rights. We all have rights, and we need to have protection. So, I'm just, the Supreme Court has never really been very fair with this, and Terry v. versus Ohio is one of them that really needs to be overturned. I could care less about Roe versus Wade. I mean, frankly, I don't really care. But this one I do care, because it's a flagrant violation of our privacy rights, and then this opens up to more dangers of our privacy rights with the NSA and the FBI and the ATF, and from local to federal agencies. So, but before we move on, with this case with the religious person, let me ask you a question, Seth. Who was the first one who? Why do we continue using a Bible to swear an oath of allegiance? Why can't we swear an oath of allegiance to the Constitution? Like, place your hand on the Constitution and not on a Bible, on a Christian Bible. Do you agree with that, Seth?
They do take an oath to office. They swear an oath to protect and defend the Constitution. It's an interesting topic. I mean, as a Christian, I would personally want to swear an oath on a Bible, but if there's a non-Christian, they're swearing an oath on a Bible is meaningless to them. So it's I don't think it's necessary. I'm not against it, but I don't think it's necessary to. It's a touchy subject, I guess.
Well, go ahead.
I personally would swear an oath on a Bible because it means something to me, and but I wouldn't be against somebody who didn't.
But let me ask you another question. Doesn't the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law establishing religion? Isn't that swearing an oath on a Bible, on a Quran, on a Torah, on the Buddhist scriptures, a violation of an establishment of religion? I always, or the National Day of Prayer Breakfast, funded by some religious nut family. No offense to them. Isn't that a violation of the First Amendment? I mean, why can't we all swear an oath on the Constitution that we're here to protect and maintain, and not on a religious document? I never really understood that. Why do we all swear an oath to a religious document, not to the constitutional document?
Well, I'd say that you're swearing an oath to the Constitution, but you're doing it with your hand on the Bible. I might disagree with you there, but I'm not fervent about it. I mean, if there's somebody who's an atheist who's being sworn into office, they're putting their hand on the Bible is meaningless to them. So why would I object to them not? I personally don't see a problem with it.
Okay. No. I mean that. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no. Go ahead.
No. I mean, that's. I respect your opinion on that. I just found it kind of odd. Congress should make no statement of religion, and yet we're establishing to swear an oath on a religious document to uphold and maintain the Constitution. That sounds like an oxymoron to me, but that's just how I see it. But you see it the other way. That's totally cool. But that's something that many media personalities have always said that this is a Christian country and was founded on Judeo-Christian values. And, but yet again, people like Sean Hannity or Bill O'Reilly, Mark Levin. But again, the first sentence of the First Amendment is that there should be no establishment of religion. It doesn't say anywhere Judeo-Christian or Judeo-Christian religions. Is established of religions, so it applies to all religions. That's why this country is so great that we are not bounded by, like, for example, in Argentina, the official religion is Roman Catholicism, and presidents in Argentina have to be a member of that church. Here, you can have a Jewish person run for president, or a member of Congress, or Buddhist or atheist and all that. So I just find it kind of like conflicting information on that. But and I know many Trumpers, they always claim that this is a Christian nation. You see Marjorie Greene with a Bible and a big cross in her, and that's fine. That's her privacy of her own home, and she can have that. But when she gets to the halls of Congress, she better respect those words of the First Amendment.
Well, I'd say that, I mean, there is a lot of hypocrisy, among, I look at a lot of the Trump crowd and, I don't know if you've seen this, but for me, I've seen this kind of strange amalgamation of different views in the Trump universe. There are some, I mean, he's obviously got, there's this hypocrisy. Trump has really been very much supportive of the LGBT agenda, and yet the Christian conservatives who still support him see no problem with that, but they do with anybody else, whether it's Democrats or even Republicans who support gay marriage. They have a big problem, but then they don't with Trump. It's so that's kind of a separate topic, but it gets into things like I remember back I don't remember how many years ago it was, but there was a mosque that was trying to open up near Ground Zero. And, I remember a lot of Christians, saying they shouldn't be allowed to open their mosque. And I was thinking, look, if they buy the property, they have the right to. I mean, look, that's part of the separation of church and state. It doesn't matter if I'm not Muslim, but that's part of our freedoms, and that's one of the things we need to remember is, freedom is sometimes dangerous, but I would rather have freedom than security. So, we do not use the government to stop things we don't like. The government's there to bring justice after crimes have been committed.
Yeah, no, you're right, and I do remember that mosque, that mosque building near Ground Zero, and again, if they buy the land, and and they're honorable and decent citizens of this country, then by all means. But the hypocrisy of the Trumper movement and with Donald J. Trump, not only that he has been very supportive to the LGBTQ community, but this is a man that has committed one of the sins of the Ten Commandments, not once, not twice, but thrice, and yet they voted for him. So, if you're a Christian and you believe in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not commit adultery, and this man has no regard to it, and why would they vote for? Why would they support him? And then he has lied, he has cheated, he has stole, Trump University and all that. So the hypocrisy of the Trumper movement, we can discuss that with the indictments when it comes to another episode. But on the First Amendment, but going back to originally, you're right. I'd rather have dangerous liberty than security. And speaking of the Fourth Amendment and the rights, do you recall, Seth? And I think it was 2016. I think it was during the election. I think Trump already accepted the nomination, or just before the nomination, there was a shooting in a San Bernardino office. I think in a San Bernardino FBI office. Do you recall that?
Okay. I'm vaguely remembering it.
And there were a Muslim couple, and they both got killed by FBI fire. And they recovered their cell phones, but their cell phones were locked because Apple.
Okay.
Oh, you did?
Go ahead.
Oh, no, because you remember, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the cell phones were locked due to an Apple iPhone technology issue. And I remember Ted Cruz wanted FBI to really hammer iPhone and Apple into opening up that phone, but that phone is private. That's you can't just take the phone just like that. You need a warrant to do that. Even if they're dead, you still need a warrant because that property goes to the family, and they need a warrant. So Ted Cruz was all for federal government intervention and police unreasonable search and seizures. But yet Trump, on that note, he says, no, we need to respect the privacy of the person, the privacy of the company, and yada, yada, yada. And yet here comes now where the FBI raided the FBI of Mar-a-Lago, and they're all saying the FBI is corrupt and yada, yada, yada. So, as you quoted, there's the hypocrisy of the Trumper movement. So I do side with Trump on that one. You can't just search. You can't just take something that doesn't belong to you. You need a warrant to search. And, even if the perpetrators are dead, you still need a warrant to open up that phone and request Apple to open up that phone. But not how Ted Cruz was doing it, and not the hypocrisy of the Trump movement.
Yeah, that gets into, obviously since 9/11, there's been massive abuse on, the NSA wiretapping and just the collecting of data. And, it's that goes into, this, liberty versus security argument. We do not want the government to the government's role is not to keep us secure. It's not. They need to have legal, like you said, you need to get a warrant to wiretap and to seize phone records and everything. And we've kind of lost this because the importance of it is, the government can just go off of hunches. And violate our rights based off of hunches, and we'll never even know about it sometimes. As we're talking about going into records, another recent Supreme Court case decision where the court unanimously 9-0 sided with the IRS being able to secretly go into people's bank accounts to try and find evidence that people have violated the tax code. This is dangerous. This is a rogue government that is controlling us. It's an effort to control us, and we need to reject that and get back to understanding that we need to protect ourselves and not rely on the police, rely on government to protect us. The government's there when a crime has already been committed. That's when the police need to do police work, where they gather evidence and they get warrants. They do it legally. But we're in a state where the government is trying to make criminals out of citizens rather than trying to catch criminals who have already broken the law.
Yeah, and with that, on that note, for the recent Supreme Court decision where they've given the IRS to go in without warrantless searches on bank accounts, they've done. They recently did an. I think I've stopped there in an article that I'm writing on that, where they allow the NSA and the FBI to go into telephone records and cellular phone records. And again, that's just something that you said, that it's also, somebody pointed out, and you pointed out, Seth, I don't know if it was Ron Paul, that it is a violation of the Third Amendment. Now, I know the Third Amendment says that no soldier, official of the federal government has a right to take quarters in the privacy of their home, but that you could say that it's the federal government is setting up quarters in your own home and listening to your phone, going into your emails and all that. That could be a violation of the Third Amendment. I know the Third Amendment sounds old-fashioned because back then you had British officers making sleeping arrangements in a person's home and all that, but it's quite relevant today. It's no member of government has a right to take up living quarters and professional quarters inside a person's home. And I know they did that during the Civil War, where you had Union Army officials in many homes in many plantations and homes in Alexandria, which Alexandria was a demilitarized zone. And that again is, I know that the Civil War, many Southern civilians had to take the oath of allegiance, but they were still Americans, even though they disagreed with the U.S. government. They were still Americans, and they still had civil rights and civil liberties, despite of their temper tantrum. So that's very, the Third Amendment, which sounds old-fashioned, but it's very relevant today. And people need to wake up to that, and people need to wake up to what is going on and what the government is doing within our phones and our emails and our mails, our mail and bank accounts. I sometimes do not trust the post office. I don't know what who's there behind the post office, if they're examining my letter to my grandmother, or if I send them a box of cookies but they think it's something else. That's why I'm very nervous of what's going on with my government, what is going on behind the post office. So people need to know your rights, and that is privacy, not to do that.
Yeah, and bringing up the NSA, and I went back and just found it. Yeah, we talked about this, a few months ago, and I had read something from the New American where, basically making the case that because the NSA is part of the Department of Defense, and so they're part of the military structure, and they're collecting all of this private data from Americans across the country, and we don't even know all the data that they collect on each one of us individually, and the Third Amendment was not there to prevent seizures of private homes. That's the Fourth Amendment, but it's there to deny access to our personal information. And, that this gets into, like I said at the beginning, that privacy is not explicitly stated as a right in the Constitution, but it's implied with the Third Amendment, with the Fourth Amendment. The implication is that we have a right to privacy, and we need to understand our privacy rights, because I don't know if you've ever watched some of these First Amendment audit videos. And we'll see, these First Amendment auditors who go out to, like town halls and stuff like that, and city halls, and they go to video record officials as they're doing their public work. And, there's no expectation of privacy when you're in public, but when you're in private, in your private homes, you absolutely have a right to privacy. And, it's very interesting to sometimes watch some of these First Amendment auditors and, the government officials being offended and talking about, they have a privacy while they're in public. Well, no, you don't have privacy when you're in public, but these same government officials have no problem with the government spying on us when we're in our homes, which is just the hypocrisy of it. And so, when you're in public, you have no privacy rights, but when you're in private, you do. And people, it's something that I kind of remember in the 90s, some of these movies that were coming out. I don't remember the name of it, but there's one with Will Smith and Gene Hackman where it was kind of going into the government spying on all Americans. And, I thought, the American public was kind of against the idea of the government spying on us back then. But I think after 9/11, things changed for the worse. Like, people just started looking towards the government for more and more protection. I think a lot of our rights when it comes to privacy violations have occurred after 9/11.
The American people after 9/11, and even before 9/11, but on the sense of national security, we've become more dependent of the federal government. And that's the word that I always use on our podcast. Dependent. The American people has really become dependent of the ginormous conglomerate that is the federal government, and it's not even a corporation, so I don't know why I would call it conglomerate, but just this massive ball of dependency that we've become. But in the public square, you do have a right to in the public and private arena, you have a sense of privacy. Because you're in public lands, and even you're in the privacy of your home, and that's why I know you touched base on another article on the group of children singing some song. I don't think it even was the national anthem. It had the music for the national anthem, but the lyrics were not the national anthem. I don't know what it was, but there's a time and a place to do that. I mean, you didn't see children singing in the Roman Senate. You saw them in the Roman Forum. I think that's the reason why the framers and the architects that built Washington City decided to make a national mall very similar to the National Forum, to the Roman Forum. So there's a place for that. And I don't think the Capitol Dome is, again, I didn't see children singing in front of Julius Caesar or Augustus Caesar inside the Roman Senate. We saw them in the Roman Forum, and that's basically what the National Mall is. So I think, you need to have some respect for the institution of where you are. And, I don't think it was a violation of any First Amendment right, because again, you have to know your place, and you're not gonna start singing in the National Cathedral because you're there to pay respect, or in Arlington Cemetery because you're there to pay respect. So I know you probably differ from that. What's say you, Seth?
I may retract one thing I stated in that story, and that that they didn't have to get permission before. I have a problem with, and I think you do too, and in just general life, that people ask for permission to exercise their rights. In this case, they needed to get permission to sing the national anthem. I think what they were singing when in the video where they get stopped at that point, they were on to some of the other verses of the national anthem that most Americans don't know. I think there's like 4 or 5 different verses, and most of us don't know any more than the one that is sung at sporting events. This choir, the thing is, this choir did get permission, and they found that out later, and the Capitol Police just said it was a miscommunication, that they didn't realize that the choir got permission beforehand. So they did have permission to be there. We can't let the Capitol just get out of hand. I think there needs to be respect of people being allowed to go to the Capitol and to voice their opinions, but there needs to be within certain boundaries, so they can set rules, so you can't disrupt the work that's going on in the Capitol. I think Americans have the right to redress their grievances to congressmen in their congressional offices if they're there. You have to have some level of decorum.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, citizens, of course, have a right to petition and list their grievances to members of Congress and their public officials, but singing is not one of them. And this is where, of course, the Trumper movement said that, oh my God, Capitol Police is shutting down a couple of kids singing. I'm like, really? I mean, this is not, that's fine that they got permission, but it's common sense. The Capitol Dome or the Rotunda where it was or wherever. I mean, when I was in Montana and Helena and there were children, they were outside singing. They were not inside in the Rotunda. Even though some of them did ask for permission. But my whole point is that, there's time and a place for that. And, if they don't have a list of grievances and petitions, and they just want to do a little political theater, take it somewhere else. Take it to the National Mall where you can get more people in there. And, I just think Trumpers, always like to make political amateur theater. And, I have my beef on that because I can't stand amateur theatrics, and Trumpers love amateur theatrics. They're like the worst crew of a Shakespeare theater back in the 1500s that they didn't know how to act. So I just have a thing on that. But if they have a list of grievances, then that's fine. Then list your petition. But here's another thing, Seth. Why aren't they in the National Congress? Why aren't they in their own legislatures? Why aren't they petitioning? This is the thing that really also, excuse a Southern quote, chokes my chickens. A Southern quote really disturbs me is that why are we so heavily concentrated in the National Congress? Why aren't we just doing it in petitioning our legislators away from the National Congress. Don't give attention to the National Congress. For example, Marco Rubio is making a whole stink on something that's going on with the Dodger Stadium. I don't even know what that is. And I'm like, what is a senator from Florida involved heavily in something that's going on in California? Stick to your own state. Stick to the issues of your state. Why is he going to California? Why? And that really disturbs me, that we have really become dependent on everything to the federal government, singing on Capitol Hill, talking about the Dodger Stadium, whatever that hell that is. So that's where I have a beef is, nothing revolves around the federal government. We're making it revolve around the federal government when we really shouldn't.
Yeah, and that I will completely agree with you on that. I don't even know that I'm gonna vote for president or for any federal elected offices in the upcoming election. I might never again, because this is the problem: is we need to get the states to stand up for their own state rights. And this is, if we want to get back to liberty, we need to get back to local and state officials standing up to the Leviathan in Washington, D.C. and saying, yeah, no, we're not going to do what you say, and we're not going to let you steal all our money, because this is the big issue, is that the federal government has all the money now, and they divvy it out to their pals. And and so states and local government just comply with whatever mandates come down from Washington. And that goes back to, it really upsets me when, conservatives will, act like the COVID lockdowns, like, it was just the Democrat governors, which is a lie. It was every governor, basically. And it started with Donald Trump dangling all the money over all the states and saying, hey, comply with whatever Anthony Fauci says and you'll get all this dough from us. And that's really important, that we get back to understanding the power that ultimately the people have, and the power that the local and state government have, and they've ceded all their power over to the federal government. And you brought up the Dodger Stadium thing, and Marco Rubio. I didn't see Marco Rubio in particular, but that's I know what you're referring to. There was some offensive transgender or drag queen group that they invited that openly mocks Catholicism. And, I have a problem with that group, but I would agree. I don't know what Marco Rubio is going to do. I think that's also, a lot of these type of culture wars that the conservatives fight. And this is kind of the point I was trying to make back in that series I did on Pride Month, is that the conservatives always look to use government to try and fight these cultural battles, but this is something that churches and pastors need to fight as free people and use their First Amendment rights and not look towards the government to solve this, because I think we're in a lot of the mess we're in, and a lot of these cultural issues have cropped up because of our dependency on government. We need to, from the government level, we need our elected officials to understand your job is not to fight the culture wars. Your job is to get the government the heck out of our lives. As free people, we need to battle these things that we see wrong. Whether you agree with my position on the cultural issues or not, we as free people need to be able to use our First Amendment to fight these types of issues and not look towards the government to solve them.
No, you're on that note, on the culture war, both the conservative, the Republican side, and the Democrat side, the liberal side, are seeking dependency of the federal government and asking these so-called Christian conservative politicians on the national level to be a spokesman, the National Pro-Life or the Right to Life, or these religious groups, the Catholic groups, the U.S. Catholic bishops. And, one point I want to make, Seth, is that, you probably won't vote in this year's election. And again, why, you're absolutely right. I mean, both sides have sounded more and more into federal government tyranny. I'm reading back in 1837 where Daniel Webster sounds just like Roger Taney and John Calhoun, seeking, federal government, not John C. Calhoun, more like Roger Taney, that, they both have said that our rights are ceded, our state sovereign rights are ceded to the federal government. And I'm like saying, whoa, I mean, this is the issue that, even back then, 1837, both sides have really, talked into this idea that we have to cede our laws into the federal government's bureaucratic train wreck that is Congress and all that. So that's one main beef I have, that politicians are all sound the same. They're really not worth it. I know Trumpers are loving RFK Jr. I don't see why. I don't see how they're really thinking RFK Jr. is like the savior. I mean, maybe JFK Jr. JFK, his uncle was a little bit more conservative than he was. But I don't see RFK Jr. getting the nomination, the DNC nomination. But Trumpers are loving him. Biden himself is just a liberal loser. And then, of course, Trump and DeSantis and all that, and Nikki Haley. I mean, they're just aching for federal government bureaucracy. So it's as you see in 2024, again, as we saw in 2020, we're seeing this ginormous cloud of dependency on the conservative side, on the liberal side. And all that has to do with the who controls the power, who controls the money that I'm going to give to you. Of course, the 17th Amendment of the national senators interfering in other lives, like Marco Rubio in California or Gavin Newsom in Florida. I mean, stick to your own mess of state. Don't come. We know Florida has its issues, but Florida has to do it on its own. California, well, you're screwed. You need to fix your issues because you're really screwed up. So, this dependency, it's that we think that it's one nation. Yeah, it's one nation, but with sovereign states holding it together. So people need to go back to individualism, of liberty, of individual and sovereign rights, and read the Constitution, read every single amendment, every single article, and you will see that it's not the federal government's responsibility to take care of us. It is within each sovereign state that you live in. You live in Illinois, I live in Florida, many people live in other states. That's their responsibility. In federal elections, both on the president or member of Congress or Senate, I'm probably gonna write in something, but I'm gonna concentrate on my state elections.
Yeah, and I'd say to that, I've said this before. I think the most important person you can vote for is your sheriff, because if you get a good sheriff who understands the Constitution, they can they can go a long way to fighting abuses from the government. Really, it's people have to get back to understanding that they have power. I mean, we view I've always had, I mean, even back when I was more of a rah-rah Republican, I used to always think, that this idea of making the President of the United States is the most powerful man in the world. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. The power is supposed to be in the people's hands, right? I mean, isn't that kind of the idea of America? So I've always had a problem with, the way we view that office and the government in general. And, the power is supposed to be in our hands. And, just to, go back to that, man who was arrested in Pennsylvania. And one of the things that was from the affidavit from the officer who arrested him. Basically, this officer said before this event even happened, he went up to the Christians who were across the street and told them to stay on their side of the street, and that they could not go over to the other side where they were raising a pride flag at the city hall. And, I mean, even that offends me because, well, this is a public event put on by the city. These Christians had every right to go over and interact as long as it's peaceful, and they remain peaceful. And this is kind of the way our government has been set up to kind of segregate people, and this is why we have this tribalism where people who disagree with each other are unable to interact with each other, and we see the hostilities rising among the different groups of Americans. And we need to start talking to people that we disagree with and being, respectful and tolerating differences of opinion. Tolerance is not acceptance. You do not have to accept somebody's points of view, but you tolerate that they have the right to have different views than you. This tribalism is turning us into children. I mean, we've talked about the Trump arraignments, and I just watched a video yesterday that really kind of encapsulated things for me. I don't know the people who put this YouTube video out. I don't know what perspective they're coming from, but I kind of think they're coming from a perspective of showing how both sides are just have gone insane, because the video is titled "Activism Uncensored: The Circus Outside Trump Arraignments in New York City and Miami." And basically it showed both those who hate Donald Trump and those who love Donald Trump, basically just screaming at each other. And I'm just watching it as like everybody's just a child. We're not able to have conversations with each other. And this, I think this is, kind of what the government wants. They want us at each other's throat. It's kind of a divide and conquer mentality. If you get the people against each other, they're able to get more and more power to encroach on our rights, all of our rights, whether you're on the left or on the right. And we need to reject tribalism and get back to individualism.
Well, you're right. You're right there. The federal government has always been divisive, and ever since again, we can go back to the days of discussing slavery. What happened on the Senate chamber, that a member of Congress came here and acted like a spoiled child and started beating a national senator, Preston Brooks of South Carolina. I mean, these things are not tolerable. And then you see this sense of, you see Marjorie Greene and Lauren Boebert or Joe Wilson scream "you lie" to Obama, and instead of talking to Obama or saying, "Listen, I disagree with you," and I disagree with George W. Bush and Obama. I think that federal government has no right on immigration and other issues. I believe it belongs to the states. I believe the states have to enforce it. And I strongly believe that, do that. But I'm not going to scream, "You lie," to liberals, because I want to talk. I want to bring their voice and understand, because I'm an independent. I don't see conservative or liberal. I see the Constitution. And frankly, I see that all powers to the Constitution some powers to the Constitution belongs to the states. Others are retained by the federal government, very few. But I believe on the commerce, on the naturalization, and the supremacy clause, those are withheld to the states. And of course, you have your Ninth Amendment, which is a right that is personal and the people's rights. But, we need to open. I mean, for example, in the early version of our discussion, I disagree with you on the First Amendment. Did I call you names? Did I say no? I mean, if you believe if Seth Hancock believes that we can swear allegiance to the Bible, the Quran, that's fine. I do not, and I'm not going to call you anything. I know you're not going to call me a heathen, and I'm not calling you anything else, because that's your right and that's your opinion. And we have to respect each other. One last thing. The First Amendment, as well as all the amendments, it's a common sense amendment. They're all common sense. They're all a catch-22 amendments. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. So, the First Amendment, it says peaceful demonstrations. It doesn't say violent demonstrations. Peaceful. It says peaceful assembly, not a violent assembly. So people need to read the Constitution. People need to know every single word. I've had this one last thing. I have a discussion with another friend of mine that I asked him, why do you think that when it says Congress to establish a uniform, it says Congress to enforce? It's two different words. Congress established a uniform code of naturalization. It is the states who enforce the Uniform Code of Naturalization. It is the states to create their own laws, not to assist with federal law. Federal law can have, and you can nullify that as we saw in 1798. But, people need to read the Constitution, and every single word has meanings that don't really mean what they mean because the High Court says it so. So, we need to have good debates, good discussions to remain a peaceful assembly, peaceful discussion. Right, Seth?
Yeah, and we need to kind of get out of our bubbles and talk to people. It's not easy when everybody's been put in this heightened state by the divisive nature of government. But that's how we get back to liberty when people start realizing that they have the power and that they have rights, and the government needs to be put in check, whether you agree with the people or not. It's the old line from talking about the First Amendment. Basically, I might not agree with what you have to say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. We need to defend people, especially people we disagree with, when, their rights are being violated.
Yeah, and on my last note, people need to really read every single word of the Constitution, every single comma, every single punctuation, because it's always valid. And, don't believe everything the federal court says or the Congress says. Believe for yourself. Know your rights. Know every single word, because slowly, as government tries to find ignorance among the masses, that's why on one note, I'm sorry, because government will always try to find ignorance among the masses, and they'll always buy that ignorance. And in a very HBO put out a series called Rome. And the first episode is one of my favorite episodes because Matilda Scipio asks Cato, what is this awful noise plebs make when they're happy? And Cato, the younger, says, this is music. Wait until Caesar starts howling for our blood. then you hear something dreadful. And, this is what happens when government, where the populace comes in and just starts throwing money away to the ignorant, starts giving away money to buy their ignorance, to buy their confidence. And that's what the government is doing. They're buying ignorance. They're buying their populism to the people. And Trump has done it. Biden has done it, all the way down to LBJ and FDR. They've done it, and that's very sad. And I really want the American people to stop buying into this ignorance, to stop buying to this dependency, because we don't need it. So my last point is just know your rights, and we don't need you to be ignorant.
Yeah, and just go back and. I think some of the best presidents are the ones that are the least known, like Calvin Coolidge or Grover Cleveland. And that's because we want a president who's not sticking their nose in everything we do. We want people who we don't even realize we have a president. That's what the government's supposed to be. It's supposed to be so small that we don't even realize it exists.
Exactly. And with that note, we need limited government, and we need people to be more affluent in their constitutional rights. So, Seth, this was an interesting discussion. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. And till Sunday, have yourself a great night.
Good night.